All right, hello everyone. My name is Jerrin. I'm just doing a presentation on routing a run, kind of from the leader or perspective of a leader who's in charge of leading the run. So, topics we'll go over today is what leading a run means, knowing when different builds get power spikes, thinking an objective ahead, identifying who has the ability to push, setting up objective chains, lab windows, quest state progression where backpack is needed, missing or fixing a missing objective, and any questions. So, what leading a run means. Usually, the person leading the run is just focused on getting XP or doing very minor side objectives. This lets them have an easier time keeping track of where everyone is in the run, what levels they are, what gear they might still need, and who's able to keep pushing. Some side objectives include lab trials, portal replacements, or bandits. It's all very quick and easy stuff so that they can keep XPing. Leading a run doesn't necessarily mean that you're leading it alone. Generally, as over the course of a run, you'll have one or two people in charge of helping out leading, because the first person who's leading the run will get over an XP and they'll need to push an objective, meaning they can't really focus on leading a run. So then they'll start. They'll have someone else lead the run over instead. If the person leading the run needs to push progression, like I said, someone else can take over temporarily. So nearly all builds get a power spike at level 16 because this is when you get your Herald to Fire, Skitterbot, Blood Rage, all sorts of useful passive aura skills to help out with damage. Another big boost is flat damage crafts at 24. The fire craft is found in Solaris 2, but the lightning craft is near Piety in Lunaris 2. This is really good for casters and any builds that rely on flat elemental damage, like any claw builds, venom gyre, or bow builds, such as tornado shot, rain of arrows, etc. The next big power spike is at 28 for a lot of builds, a lot of caster builds mostly, with Gravicious being killed. This includes Armageddon Brand, Cremation, traps get a whole bunch of cooldown traps, Pyroclast Mine becomes available, Lightning Conduit for Lightning Witches that are leveling. And then two-handed melee, that's when Gilded Axe becomes available. That's really good for when you're leveling Asunder or some other melee builds. And there's a couple bases, especially for bows, Royal Bow. That's also really good, but for a lot of the claw, dagger, and bow builds, it relies heavily on just a weapon with high flat elemental damage. Base doesn't necessarily matter too much. It's just mostly the flat damage. Similar to melee skills. Melee skills really rely heavily on a well-rolled Fizz Axe. So you'll do Vendor Recipe with the Granite Flask for that, or with a Whetstone and Rustic Sash. So thinking an objective ahead. After you've given out assignments for any given objective, you want to be thinking of the next objective that might come up, and keeping in mind, okay, who am I having XP right now? Who's doing a minor objective that might be strong once the next objective rolls around and stuff like that. You also want to make sure that everybody is on the correct quest state. You'll be asking, do you have ability? Can you confirm? Or the main pushable ask ability confirm. That means that there's the swirl button on every player's portrait. It'll be blue if you're able to swirl in, gray if you don't have the quest state. That being said, Apex check, that's very important in Act 2. You can swirl to the Vol Oversoul, kill the Vol Oversoul, but not have the Apex, and you can't progress into Act 3 because of that. So you'll have to rerun the zone. That's not good. And then doors. Doors to Tower of God 2, and then the door in Act 5 into the Chamber of Innocence section. Those are two important quest states, so you have to make sure you click. Know when your main pushers are getting power spikes and plan accordingly. So what I said about the crafts, like crafts at 24, armor brand for your main bossers in Act 3, those are all very important so that you have your strongest possible player farming up to kill bosses as needed. So identifying who has the ability to push, this will just be kind of a basic outline of what kind of leveled person you're going to want progressing each zone. So in Act 1, generally, the person killing Brutus will just be the first person who gets to ledge. They'll push all the way forward. Similar for Merveil, first person to ship Graveyard, they push all the way forward. Act 2, The highest levels will go to Chamber and Weaver because Weaver is a tough fight. You want to make sure your strongest person's going there. And then Chamber of Sins to Fidelitas is also pretty tough. So after that main objective chain, you'll have your 15 plus push Vol Ruins. If possible, get them a ruby ring. So at 16, they can put that on. There's a lot of really dangerous explosive arrow mobs in that zone that can one shot. So extra fire resist really helps. Templars can keep their glacial hammer at level 1 and then sell it with an iron ring to create the ruby ring, and that helps out a lot. Going into Vol Oversoul, you might not always have someone at 18 once you hit Northern Forest. So they can, if they're like, say, 17, they can farm Northern Forest running up north into the caverns, and usually they'll be 18 by that time. Northern Forest is a very good XP zone. Act 3, usually the highest XP or first in town, goes to Crematorium, and they'll push all the way, set up the lab trial, and set up Piety. After doing sewers, 23 plus goes to docks, and you can send someone else to Solaris. Generally, sending someone to Solaris is an XP sack or sacrifice, meaning there's not going to be a whole lot of XP you get out of Solaris, so the person being sent there will fall behind. Generally, you don't want to send the person you're hoping to kill Dominus into Solaris Temple, because that'll just put them way too far behind and they won't be able to catch up. As for progressing to Piety, the minimum level you want is 25.5. So just try and make sure you're farming up docks as much as possible to be on level to push forward. And then have your best bosser or 27 plus go to Dominus. If they're not quite 28, it's not ideal. Generally, you'll want to make sure the person killing Dominus has time to XP to 28, set up their armor crema links, and then be able to go to the Tower of God to kill Dominus. So what you can do is in a situation where they still need time, and it's time to do Dominus, is that you can have someone on the same realm, say EU or NA. They can have one person progress forward to the boss, portal at the boss, and then have your bosser come in with all his setup links and kill the boss. So that gives them a little bit more time if it's needed to kill Dominus. So Act 4, usually second highest XP goes to Commanderesso because you want your highest XP to be able to go through the first lab window and have lab and be ascended by the time he has to kill Malachi. 32 is the bare minimum for the Belly of the Beast going into Malachi, so you really want to make sure you're hitting that XP breakpoint. That's why you usually have the second person, or the second highest, set it up Commanderesso. Now, if you're a little under leveled on Commanderesso, say you're only about 31 or 30, what you can do is you need to be 32 to kill Commanderesso. So you can progress to Duresso's Dream and say you're only 31. You can then go to Combs' side, go up to Combs' Dream, and then hopefully by then with 2 zones of XP that you can be farming, you can be 32, and then you can start Commanderesso. So you don't necessarily need to run all the way to Duresso, which would be the normal case if you're on XP. You can do a split setup where you would just do one half of Comb and one half of Duresso. So Act 5, First in Ascent rushes all the way to Chamber of Innocence. Generally, if you're the first out of town, you'll be the fastest person to get there. It's usually a Deadeye, just because by this point they have Tailwind and they're very quick. You'll have the highest XP continue to XP once you reach Chamber of Innocence, because you want them to get as much XP as possible so that they can carry nearly all of Act 6, if not all of Act 6. So usually you'll have the second highest XP, just start on Innocence, and then you'll have someone else kill Katava, and that person can just keep XPing that whole time and get ready for Act 6. So in Act 6, the person who is able to farm Chamber of Innocence all of Act 5 should be strong enough to push the whole act. They'll go through and clear the whole thing. Min level for Brine King fight is 45, so you do want to make sure that you have enough XP for the boss so you don't fall too far behind going into Act 7. A lot of progression going through the acts is kind of a leapfrog of setting one person up to farm XP so that they can kill that act boss or just progress the next act, and you just rotate back and forth between a couple of players. So in Act 7, the strongest person will get to Malagaro's map. The Malagaro's map zone is a very rippy instance, and dying is just absolutely banned in that zone, because if you die, you have to run the zone all over again, assuming a 6-man party, because you only have 6 portals for the zone. So the strongest will go get Malagaro's map. The second highest or strongest can run to Chamber of Sins and drop a portal so that they can go there. After Malagaro's map, the fastest person to Den can then just push all the way to Groost. And then you'll have your strongest bosser uh, go and grab fireflies first so that they can have the fireflies and be ready to go straight to the Temple of Decay and kill Arakali. And usually, the person who pushed up to the temple will portal out and then go get fireflies and be ready by the time the boss is dead. Going into Act 8, Doedry is free for all. It's just an arms race to whoever gets there first. Once the valve in Doedry's cauldron is clicked, she is considered tagged, so you can call everyone in and have a 6-man ready to kill her the moment she becomes targetable. After Doedry, the 2 strongest players split, one going to Solaris and the other one to Lunaris. And keep in mind, you need to be 52 plus to kill Solaris and Lunaris so that you're on XP to start XPing and pushing into BA. If you're a little bit under leveled, what you can do is farm a little bit of Harbor Bridge going up to the boss door so that you're on level at 52 to kill the boss. Otherwise, if you're on level, the portal should be on the door for you, so you can go straight into the boss. So Act 9, your strongest 2 solo players will need to keep leveling until they're about 55 minimum, though you can wait until 58 and it's more comfortable. And this is also the next window for Cruel Lab. So once you have 2 players minimum who are 55 plus and have done Cruel Lab, you can start progressing Act 9. Now, usually in Act 9, that's when Orobots and party groups start playing by themselves. They'll still stay in the 6-man party, but the carry Orobot and whatever third support they have just farm BA from there just to get ready for maps. And they'll only usually do side objectives or very small things, and they just want to focus on XPing from there. After you've progressed all the way up to the Rotten Core, that's also a very dangerous zone. You want to have your strongest person or tankiest physical class, usually someone running Determination, run that zone because dying feels really bad because it's a very long zone and there's not many checkpoints, if at all. Act 10, the fastest runner-up onto the cathedral rooftop, will usually just keep running forward. Second person entering the zone will walk into Bannon's door and call everyone to swirl them. This lets you complete Bannon and free Bannon while that main runner is still in the zone, so that he gets quest state completion there and can continue going forward. And then once you get the Staff of Innocence again and you start progressing towards Katava, you're going to have everyone open up the horns, and then that is the Merciless Lab window. And usually you'll have one person, usually the fastest runner, run all the way to Katava's boss door, drop a portal, go do lab, and the first person to get out of lab will usually kill Katava. So setting up objective chains. All right, so end of Act 1, when you've reached Ship Graveyard, you're going to have a couple different players doing different things. Player 1 will primarily push towards Merveil. Player 2 will go get the All Flame. And the third and fourth, and this is generally the second, third, and fourth player who enters Ship Graveyard is assigned to this. So player 2 gets the All Flame. Player 3 will find Fairgraves, open a portal, and just start farming the zone for XP. Player 4 does the same. Player 2, once they have the All Flame, will swirl to player 3. Wait until player 3 leaves the zone, not by portaling out. They should never portal out because they want to keep that. They want to keep that portal up. Player 2 will then start the Fairgraves fight, wait until he sees skeletons spawn, then take the portal out. Player 2 will then, or not take the portal out, but he'll then swirl player 4. Player 4 will then leave the zone, usually by swirling someone in town or just someone in a different zone, but not the person at Merveil. And he will then start Fairgraves, open up a new portal, and once the skeletons spawn, he'll call everybody except the Merveil pusher in so that they can complete Fairgraves. The reason you wait for skeletons to spawn is because that's when it's one, considered tagged, and two, when player one comes back to do his Fairgraves, he doesn't have to wait for skeletons or mobs to spawn. Everything will be spawned already. So once you've killed both of the Fairgraves, everyone can go back to town, turn in the quest to get the skill point, and that saves them a lot of time because then they don't need to worry about doing Fairgraves like after Mervale and pausing the run to do all that. So that way, these 5 players or 3 players are ready to immediately push into Act 2 instead of having to go do another quest in Act 1. So once Mervale is dead, or once Mervale is ready, rather, player 1 calls everyone in, you kill Mervale, and then you can progress forward. Player 1 then goes back through player 3's portal, and they do their own Fairgraves. Start of Act 2, generally, player 1 with like the highest level will go to Weaver, and then player 2 goes to Chamber of Sins. 3 sets a Boke, and 3 is usually the person who killed Mervale, but not always, but usually. Player 4 sets up Caitlin, player 5 sets up Alira, and player 6 starts running towards Fell Shrine for Lab. If the player 6 is very fast, he can usually get Lab set up. Otherwise, if he isn't fast enough, he can have the portal set up a little bit after the first chain, and you can have the Lab trial up for when the ball is up for Northern Forest. But the order of operations for this portal chain is player 2 will have the portal up on trial. Once he finds Fidelitas, everybody swirls in to Chamber of Sins for trial, clicks trial, leaves. He opens up a new portal at Fidelitas with the quest item. Everyone swirls in, grabs the gem, leaves, and then they all portal to player 1 for Weaver, kill Weaver, get quest item, take the portal out. Player 3 will... Oh, I have the colors wrong here. Player 4 will then go into Craitlin's zone because they have the portal up on him, talk to Caitlin, and once the bandit has been talked to, he's considered tagged. Then everybody swirls in, kill bandit, leaves. Then player 3 will go into Oak's zone, talk to Oak, call everyone in, select kill Oak, run up to the waypoint. Make sure you guys click on the roots so that the roots are open and you can go into the zone. At this point, the player designated to run forward will go in, grab a ruby ring, go in if there's a ruby ring available, and then progress towards the ball. From here, player 5 goes back into the Alira zone, talks to Alira, everyone swirls in, kill Alira. You'll then go down, grab the way forward quest to get that completed. And there's a couple different things that can happen from here. If the person pushing ahead into Vault Ruins needs to have Alira killed, player 5 will create a new zone and set up put a portal at a new Alira so that they can kill Alira. If at the start of the run there's anyone who says, hey, I need to help Alira, one thing you can do is make sure that if possible, they're the one running the Vault Ruins, because all they need to do then to get Alira done is just portal out, or the portal at the ball, run to Northern Forest, go back to town, take the portal to Alira, help her, and then they're done. And that's just really easy. And then the person who's setting up Alira should never be one that's helping Alira, because they have to run the zone all over again, and it's not good. So, end of Act 5. Innocents will be killed by one player, while everyone else is farming XP. From there, the person who's designated to kill Katava will run forward as player 1. Once they get to the ossuary door at the waypoint, they'll call in player 2. Player 2 will then run forward to the cathedral rooftops and open a portal and start running towards Reliquary. Now, hopefully by this point, player 1 has gotten the staff and they have a portal on the staff. They then want to open the door because it's important that if you have any melee players in your run, they can get the weapon fizz damage craft in ossuary. And then if anything happens to that portal, the door is open, so you don't need to rerun the whole ossuary zone. So player 1 will then swirl to player 2 before he leaves the ruined square, so that he goes to the portal at the cathedral rooftop and progresses towards Katava. Player 2 will then walk into Reliquary, run up to the first item, drop a portal on the first item, and begin progressing towards the second item. Now, about halfway to the second item or when he sees the second item on his map, he'll call player 3 to swirl in. Player 3 swirls into the first item, drops a portal, leaves. Player 2 then puts a portal up on the second item, calls player 4 in. Player 4 swirls in, replaces the portal. And then he goes to the third item, opens up a portal, and then all three items now have a portal on it, and you can just chain through those portals to get the objectives. Now, the main thing you want to do is make sure you're getting the staff from ossuary as soon as possible, because that is what hinges on whether or not you can progress. So once everyone has the staff, player 1 will call everyone in to swirl. They'll kill Katava, and then player 1 can go through those three players' portals to grab their skill point. And this is just going to be a quick video on how the Fairgrave setup is done. So see, he gets all flame, portals to the first player. And normally they would leave the zone, so that's only one player tagged, but not quite. But see, they're waiting for the skeletons to spawn. And then see, he opens up a new portal. Brooks left, so that's only one player tagged. And then he tells everyone to swirl, and you guys can kill a whole bunch of skeletons, get a bunch of XP.
I'll just clarify here: the one player tag is not important. Like the encounter is really not tanky at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's better for the first portal that you go in. You just let that player just continue farming. But the reason why we get the second player to leave the instance is that they can swirl back to the All Flame runner after the All Flame runner places the portal down. So like that, they're doing like sort of a teleport from the zone to the same zone. But the only way to do that is by leaving first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that just places them on top of the XP.
It's also important to not kill any of the mobs before everyone is in that zone. Because basically Fairgrace is guaranteed half a level.
Mm-hmm. It's a ton of XP. All right, Malagaro Act 7. So you'll have one player progressing towards Crossroads, and he'll call player 2 to the Crossroads waypoint. Player 1 continues to Chamber of Sins. Player 2 goes down to Fellshrine Ruins to Crypt. Once they get to the trial, they'll portal up at trial, call everybody to that trial. It's very important that everybody gets that trial immediately because that portal is going to be replaced quickly. So everyone completes the trial. Player 2 continues running down, gets Malagaro's map, portal is out. Player 2 will then go through Player 1's portal to Chamber of Sins 1, open the Malagaro's map in that zone, go back to the waypoint, create a new instance of that zone, walk up and open a second map to Malagaro's map. The reason you do this is because you only have 6 portals. Any deaths mean that zone needs to be rerun. It also helps that if you're playing with EU folks or Aussie folks, you create a new zone in your realm so that you're not lagging the whole way through and dying. And this will be a video kind of showcasing that off. There's some miscommunication in this run, and a portal was dropped in an incorrect spot. Don't drop a portal on the waypoint. It's kind of toxic. So you see here, I open up the map, go to the waypoint, make a new instance of Chamber of Sins 1, and you'll see the map is already in the map device, so you just activate, and then you can go through to Malagaro's Sanctum. And that means we have 6 portals or 12 portals instead of 6, and you have 2 options to run that zone if anyone dies in a 6-man party. Otherwise, you have a little bit of leeway if you're in a smaller party, but having that safety net so you don't need to rerun the whole zone is nice. Okay. So Solaris and Lunaris, Act 8. These are 2 pretty complex or complicated chains. So, like I said before, first person into town rushes to Wedry, and then once Wedry is killed, the strongest two players split off. So, player one, or for example, will push to Lunaris Temple. When they get to Bathhouse, they'll click the waypoint and then call player 3 and player 5 in. And if the person assigned to do lab is under XP, they can run up to the trial door and then call that person in separately. But player 3 and player 5 will be doing lab and setting up Ugle. So player 2 then pushes towards Solaris Temple, dropping a portal at the Gemling Legion in the Grain Gate, otherwise known as the Boys, and continuing to the Imperial Fields waypoint. And like I said, player 3 just farms until they're called in to do lab, and they'll set up the lab and portal at the lab trial. Player 5, like I also said, will progress towards Ugle. Ugle's a very low priority for this chain, so if he's not set up by the time the chain is called, it's fine. He can just portal wherever he's at in High Gardens and go to the chain. So player 4 follows player 1 into the key, but they're creating a new zone. And they'll set up Tolman and starting the event and opening a portal once Tolman is spawned. Player 6 will swirl to player 1 once they reach a Lunaris concourse. If the run is going very fast, this player can run into the Harbor Bridge and drop a portal in front of the boss door so that the boss is immediately ready to be killed. And this is assuming the run's going fast and everybody's on level. If the run's going a little bit slower, they can set this up after this initial chain while player 1 and 2 are progressing the bosses. So the chain starts once the minimums requirements are met, which is lab trial, Tolman, and the boys. And it generally starts once the player 2 reaches Imperial Fields. He'll he'll go back to town from the waypoint, take his own portal, call everyone in. You do the boys. Player 2 portals everybody out. Player 4 will then go into Tolman, open a portal. You kill Tolman, go out, do lab trial, and then if Ugle isn't set up, or you would do Ugle then, but if Ugle isn't set up, they'll get it set up so that you do the 2 bosses along with Ugle and go on from there. So the Stormblade, otherwise known as the RPG, is the big roadblock in Act 9. It just takes a lot of portals to get set up. So after everyone is 55 and above and has done lab, player 1 will run into Vesteri Desert, and if they find the Stormblade event, they drop a portal on that. Otherwise, they just get to the waypoint and call player 2 to swirl in. Player 2 will swirl into the Stormblade, complete the event, but again, making sure everybody is out of lab. If someone is in lab when the Stormblade event is done, the Stormblade item will not drop for them. So I want to make sure that everybody is in Act 9. Once they complete the Stormblade quest, they'll drop another portal, call player 3 in to replace that portal. And then they will go forward to the Oasis door, drop a portal on the Oasis door, go back to town, complete the RPG, which is talking to Sin and the other NPC to get the other 2 NPCs to get the Bottled Storm, which opens up the Oasis door. They go back through their own portal, replace that portal so that it's still up, and then starts progressing into the Oasis to kill the boss. So once player 1 then reaches the Foothills waypoint, they'll call in player 4, and player 4 will progress to the Basilisk in the Boiling Lake, get to the boss, or get him halfway down or portal out. Just make sure the portal is set up. As player 1 is also progressing through the tunnels, he will call player 5 in to complete the lab trial. Either he'll drop a portal, or they'll drop a portal along the way, or they'll find the lab, click the door, and then call the player to swirl in, and they can run through and complete it. And then once player 1 reaches the quarry waypoint, they'll call player 6 in, and player 6 will try and get the Garokon fight set up. So the order of operations here is once player reaches a refinery, the chain will go from Oasis to Boiling Lake quest item to Refinery quest item to Garokon if it was set up in time, and then to lab. If the Garokon is not set up in time, it can be done later on while the main pusher is pushing through the Rotten Core. Just the person pushing in Rotten Core will portal out once Garokon is set up and everyone goes to that. This is to allow all the quest items to be done before completing Act 9 so that you can just go straight to Act 10. So portaling at the Sky Shrine door, don't do it like that. It's a very toxic portal placement. It's not ideal. Lab windows. The first lab window is immediately after getting Deshret's Spirit in the mines. 2. Minimum level is 28. If you feel you're too low or not comfortable doing it at 28, you can wait to the second lab window. Just keep XPing during that time. Second lab window is immediately after Komen Dureso. So that's after the pusher for Malachi has completed lab and he's ready to push forward from there. The person who is pushing Komen Dureso and anybody else goes into lab and completes lab at that point. This is so that you always have someone pushing forward, even though while lab is happening, so that you always have progression happening. Cruel lab is done after reaching BA. The minimum level is 47. If you're not comfortable with 47, you can XP a little bit and then go in at around 50. If you have a carry and an Orabot in your party, you will usually have the carry and the Orabot duo Cruel Lab together, but the minimum level for that is 51.5. If you have a third bot, like a Link bot in your party, generally they're still strong enough they can do Cruel Lab on their own. So yeah, they'll just do lab on their own, and then everyone has lab done for Cruel. And then for Merc Lab, minimum level for that is usually 58 because it's about the level you're at when Merciless Lab window comes around. But it's immediately after opening up Katava's horns. Everyone goes into Cruel or into Merciless Lab rather, completes that, and then the first one out usually goes in and sets up Katava. If for Merciless Lab, carry or bots and any supports, they all do the lab together. Quest state progression where a backpack is needed. If anyone in the party is underleveled and cannot progress Ascent, usually you'll have one person who's not the person primarily running. They will portal at the Ascent portal device at the end of Ascent. The people being backpacked need to control click on that portal because the little portal in effect at the start of Act 5 is part of progression. And if you don't do that, you can't swirl into Overseer Crow, which is the next objective. So that person who portaled them in on Ascent will then run up to Overseer Crow, portal them in, kill the boss, everyone goes into town. The backpacks, which are the folks who need to be carried through a zone, will then go back to XP farming. That same person will help them get the miasmeter, drop a portal on miasmeter, and then drop a portal on Justicar Casticus for the eyes to open the door in Oriath Square. The portal for Oriath Square door should be dropped by the main runner, and they'll just progress from there. And then at that point, they're good to just keep XPing either in Combe Stronghold or Chamber of Innocence, whatever is appropriate for their level. And if anyone is underleveled and cannot get fireflies, one person will backpack them through that zone. The carry who brings them to that zone is usually the person who ran to Temple. So you have your main bosser going to get fireflies first so that he can kill Arakali. And then you have someone else running to that temple. And then once that person drops the portal on the temple door, they can then go back, start to get their own fireflies and carry people through that zone with them. So they'll run around as a group, collecting all the fireflies. Once they get to the boss, the person carrying the group will open a portal. Everyone will leave except the carry. He goes in, tags the boss, and calls those folks back in. They kill the boss, grab the rest of the fireflies. So some examples of missed objectives and how to fix them. Similar to someone's being too underleveled for the start of Act 5. Say there were people underleveled and there was only one person on level to push Malachi in Act 4. and say he missed his chance to get lab. This is the forbidden lab fix. So immediately after killing Malachi, the guy who killed it will go straight into lab, get lab done, and what you'll need to do is similar to how that one person fixed by portaling the people who needed to be backpacked at each individual zone. You're going to need to assign different people to portal on each of these objectives. So you'll have, say, player 1 is pushing, player 2 is the lab pusher who is in lab, and then so player 3 will drop a portal on the ascent. Player 4 will go to Overseer Crow, portal out, not kill him. Player 5 will then go drop a portal on Masmeter, and so on. So that way you can backpack them and quick progress them through the first part of Act 5 so that they should be, in theory, be ready to go straight into Chamber of Innocence once it's ready. So another example, say you missed Katava in Act 5, say you accidentally didn't grab the staff, rolled in too late, crashed, or what have you, and the boss died and you missed the Katava kill. If you're strong enough, you can go kill Katava yourself. You should be able to grab the staff and then just progress forward. Otherwise, if you're not strong enough, you'll need to have someone kill Katava for you. So they'll get Katava ready and set up. They'll call you in. You get Katava killed, and then that person will help progress you through mudflats and killing the boss in the Karui stronghold. Otherwise, you do it yourself, and then you just rejoin the main group once they're at Chavron. And then say the forbidden thing happens where you didn't have Apex. They called for Apex check and no one had it, or someone didn't have it. Similar to Katava Act 5, if you're strong enough to kill it yourself, you just go progress through the zone, kill it yourself. Someone will probably need to give you the Caverns waypoint, and you can scroll to them and then progress the zone. Usually someone will leave a portal on Clarissa for you so that it's just immediately ready. Is pretty time sensitive. You want to make sure that you can kill Oversoul and talk to Clarissa as fast as possible because the run isn't stopping for you and they're already progressing towards Crematorium. And like I said, if you can't kill it yourself, someone else needs to kill Oversoul for you, get to the boss, call you in for it. And questions and answers. I went through that kind of quick, but yeah, any questions?
I have questions.
Yeah.
What happens if I'm in Act 2, Val Oversoul, and I don't have Apex, and then I forget to make a new instance of the zone after Caverns?
Forget to make a new instance.
So, like, I've
As
just
the-
missed Apex, right?
Yeah,
And
you
it says,
missed
like,
Apex and you started a new run yourself.
I've started
You
a
didn't
new
have
run
Apex again?
myself, and I've just, like, gone through and clicked all the doors, but I haven't made a new instance. What happens?
Oh, well, you'll get up to the boss room and then nothing will be there and you're still at square zero, I believe.
Correct. So, what is it extremely important to do?
Make sure you control click.
Yeah.
Always control click to create a new zone.
Especially for all of these fixes where boss kills are involved. Because, like, we've had that in the past where someone's missed Apex track and then they run all the way up and then they have to run, like, all the way back down and then they have to run all the way back up again. It's already a killer, but that's really a killer. Have one more question.
Mhm.
How does the timing work in the Act 9 example? Because you have all of these objectives with different, like, timing windows.
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess depending on the speed of the group, if it's a very fast group and everyone's on level, generally you can have all of this set up at once. However, if say you have a smaller group or you only have like 2 or 3 people that can be progressing, or you have an Orabot and the 3-man like carry group running around, they can't do all these side objectives. So what you would do in that case is you would have the RPG get set up by so player 2 would still set up that, and then player 3 that's being called in would be like the Aura bot and the carry. They just come in and replace the Stormblade portal and then go back to XPing. Player 2 then still sets up Oasis, and he'll still progress and kill the Oasis boss. So the chain that you'll create there is just the RPG, the Oasis boss, and the Boiling Lake boss. So player 1, instead of running all the way to the refinery, would just run to the Boiling Lake boss. You'll get your skill point, one quest piece that you need to get into the Rotten Core, and then uh, yeah, the Stormblade RPG. And then you would create a second chain off Garukan, Lab Trial, and Refinery. So instead of one big chain, you would just create two smaller chains.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Hope,
that's one
hope
way to
that
do it.
answers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Can
suggest,
you talk?
just on this topic before we move on,
Mhm.
I would suggest though that we think about the idea of prioritizing objectives,
Mm-hmm.
and what you need is refinery plus Oasis, not Oasis. What's the zone called?
Boiling Lake.
Yeah, refinery plus
Okay,
boiling
yeah.
lake are the two priorities, right?
Yeah, so you would
And
prioritize those two, and then the skill point ones would be the second chain
yeah,
plus lab. Okay.
but because RPG is such a complicated um, thing to get right, in the case where you have an Orabot and a carry, that's actually two portals. So you can send, say, like the Orabot will replace the first RPG portal, the main
Mm-hmm.
runner can run all the way to Refinery, and then the carry can do Boiling Lake. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's how I
Okay.
would do it in 4 players. But what I'm trying to get at here is, at some point, you actually require or may require one additional portal. If you want to run all of these 6 portals within a single chain, that's because the timings are really weird. And it could be that the Shikari player in Oasis gets stuck without the ability to put a portal down. So what we need to make sure to do is to have all players complete the RPG, to sort of free up the portal on the outside of Oasis, yeah? And the way that
Mm-hmm.
we recommend people do that is, it's usually players 1 and 6 in this example, um, making sure that they have completed RPG once Quarry Waypoint has been hit. So there's an
Right.
additional
Yeah.
step of making sure that ability through the RPG quest has been um, attained for all party members. So that
Mm-hmm.
if you want to set up one really big chain, which is fine to do, but you just don't want the Shikari player to be running around circles in the fight.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
Anyway, I asked questions. Now everyone else can feel confident too.
I think someone had another question as well. Was that you, Neo?
Yeah, so what builds can you talk about would generally be preferred for what step? So, like from a leader's perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for just getting to Alira, a, any build would suffice because all you need to do is walk up to Alira and then you portal out, and you're usually good. From the perspective of boss killing, Fire Templar or Fire Witch are two incredibly powerful builds right now. Firecaster is one of the best leveling builds in the game, outside of probably a bow skill that has a really good bow. So, at least for act bosses, sending your Fire Templar or Fire Witch are really strong. Um, that being said, if you have a melee, say there's a melee build that got a really big two-hander, they can kill act bosses for that act, or you have a really good claw or dagger or bow. It really kind of just for those builds, like anything that relies on flat damage from a weapon, it really depends what content they can push based on what weapons they've managed to craft or pick up. Where fire casters and other caster skills, do the craft on their weapon and they're good to go. They can go all the way into maps with those weapons. Do they just need to redo the crafts at higher levels? Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, but like an additional supplementary question there is when you're running zones, right? So, in the transition out of Act 3, it's probably very good for Deadeye to do the first lab because they get tailwind for all those long areas up to crystal veins, right?
Yeah.
So are there any other specifics like that you would really prefer this build for this zone or like this archetype for this zone?
Well, in a solo run, for your example with Deadeye, yeah, you usually get lab done before going up the Tower of God because having Tailwind running up through those zones is really good. Um, and yeah, you could send you would probably be sending the Deadeye into first lab after Deshret's Spirit, but you would still just rely on um, the main pusher to be going through, even if they're not ascended up through Coma and Duresso.
Yeah, I'll take this one,
Espiel, maybe,
Jerrin.
yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
can speak on to.
So the way I'd think about this is through the lens of not necessarily build archetype, but build identity, right? So, what things are different builds good at? And you can look at various types of activities throughout the campaign and various sections, and some builds lend themselves very well to some sections. So the example you gave is Deadeye with Tailwind, right? Um, because of how we structure the lab windows, the first lab window is immediately after Deshret's Spirit and ends when Kalmandareso is set up. So that's lab window 1. Lab window 2 is after Crystal Veins has been opened until Malachi is ready to be killed. So usually you'll have 1 or 2 players in the run complete the first lab window, and the remaining players, let's say on average 2 players for the first lab window, and the remaining players will go in the second lab window. Obviously, Deadeye specifically gets a lot of power through having access to Tailwind. However, if you're going into the first lab window, you must get to level 32, and you will probably be considered for being one of the people who should push to Malachi kill. In my opinion, Deadeye is not as well suited to the section of the run which is between Crystal Veins Open and Malachi as, say, Fire Templar or other Armageddon brand builds, or other caster builds generally, which are scaling off flat crafts. I find personally that Deadeyes gets sort of this critical mass of power after around somewhere between level 33 to 35. And whilst, okay, you have just about that power at this point in the run that we're discussing, you're also a lot weaker in single target damage. So what I would recommend in this case is actually, if your only options are, so let's say you have only 2 players who are good on XP, who have the option to do first part carry or second part carry, and one's a Deadeye and one's a Templar. I would send the Templar to first lab first, because I think it is more important to have the character with higher boss damage and more consistent boss damage be the character to run part 2 of Act 4, so the Malachi kill, basically. Multiple reasons there. One is the piety fight, and if you're not playing bows, but even if you are playing bows, if you miss position in the piety fight, you're one tapped to an auto attack. Templar not as much, but also Templar has way more consistent damage for the Malachi trio and Malachi as well, obviously. So yes, you are sacrificing earlier Tailwind, but you're providing a more consistent, stronger second part. Now, where Deadeye really pops off is after Malachi. You have this large section from Ascent all the way until Chamber of Innocence Waypoint, where Deadeye can just zoom. You run like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish zones without any serious boss encounters. and I can tell you, like, there's no builds in the game that can keep up with Venom Gyre in this section, for example. Another really good example is in Act 6. You have pretty much from the start of Act 6 until, what's it called? Until lighting the beacon, that can all pretty much just be run. And that's another really good section for Deadeye. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. So basically, prioritize boss damage and consistency to not get bogged down there over just movement through the zones, at
Yeah.
least early, a little bit. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? That's kind of an info dump. A lot to take in.
Did you touch up on the small portal fix in case someone crashes?
Oh yeah. So say I'm assigned to do the catacombs trial and I put my portal down on the trial, but then I crash or I log out and we lose the portal. What you can do is if you have the person who dropped the portal walk back into the zone, the way the checkpoint system works in this game is it prioritizes portal, uh, waypoint, zone entry. So if my portal's gone, the checkpoint is still set to my portal because I haven't placed a new portal. So I can then call someone in to replace my portal, which is not there. So they would swirl into the zone, get dropped on my old portal location, and then make a new portal. And then that can be used to fix a missing objective that lost its portal in case of a crash or logout.
And this can basically be done in every single portal zone.
Mhm. Towns and realms. In what reference, Tiki?
So when we play with Sleepy, who's in Australia, and he creates a town, then the town is super laggy for everyone else, and vice versa. Any opinions?
So if you're in a situation where, say, 5 players are all in the same time zone and there's another player in a different time zone, what you can do is you can try and make sure that the person in the different time zone doesn't walk into towns first. That would help keep the time zone all in the same spot, so that only one person's lagging in town rather than 5 people. So if there is a majority of, say, NA players and then an Aussie player, one Aussie player in the group, you can just try and coordinate who's walking into town first, so the Aussie player doesn't walk in and set 5 NA players to a 280 ping zone.
Yeah, I'll add the just for the sake of completeness, the forbidden technique, which is whenever a player logs out and logs back in, they will create a new town instance, which will become the default town instance if any other players within the party were to enter town. Forbidden technique because logging out is banned. However, just for completeness, now you're aware. Absolutely, I would not do this unless I was 1000% sure that I did not have a portal up. But it is a viable method for resetting town for the party.
So, say an Aussie town is created. Let's just say, like, for the sake of hopefully you're not replacing any portals, you walk into Act 8 town, and you're heading towards toxic conduits, and you notice that the Aussie guy ran in first. You can, and if you don't have a portal up and you're sure on it, you can log out, log back in. It sets it to your zone so that the other 4 players aren't getting completely screwed. Because Aussie realms are not fun for anybody except Aussies, and maybe not even then.
Yeah.
Because GGG network coding is not great.
Also, yeah, when we say log out, even in these cases, like logging out on League Start is extra banned. It should be a /exit macro for League Starts.
Moeta asks, does dropping party before entering town work? That I'm not sure on.
I don't think so. I've definitely had cases where I've been in a party with someone and then they've been in a town. I think that sets like the town instance for the party, and then that is held like within the party data or something. So yeah, I would lean towards it's not good, basically. Like it wouldn't help.
All right. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it.